Revenant Blade from the Eberron Rising from the Last War Adventure module makes for a perfect start to this list at the number 10 spot, for allowing you to make use of a weapon you wouldn't normally use, the double-bladed scimitar. Along with allowing you to increase your strength or dexterity score by 1 to a max of 20, Revenant Blade allows you to gain a +1 to your AC while holding a double-bladed scimitar with 2 hands, and grants the double-bladed scimitar the finesse property, making it the only way in the game to wield a 2-handed finesse weapon. It's important that you don't confuse the double-bladed scimitar with the regular scimitar, since they both do completely different things. While the normal scimitar is a light finesse weapon that deals 1d6 slashing damage, the double-bladed scimitar deals 2d4 slashing damage, is a 2-handed weapon, and doesn't have the finesse property unless you take this feat. However, the double-bladed scimitar stands out for having the special property of allowing you to use your bonus action as part of your attack action on your turn to make one more attack, instead dealing 1d4 slashing damage on hit instead of 2d4. This helps cover the rogue's biggest weakness of only getting one attack as opposed to every other martial that can have at least 2 attacks every turn. This means that you either hit a creature and deal a bunch of sneak attack damage on top, or you miss and deal no damage to anything that turn with no retries. So being able to give this weapon the finesse property not only allows you to gain 2 attacks per turn, but having access to 2 attacks per turn means you also have 2 chances to proc your sneak attack for that turn. You also get the benefit of adding your dexterity modifier for both attacks, where you wouldn't do so for your second attack if you were dual wielding, since you're making 2 separate attacks using the same weapon. Math-wise, dealing 3d4 plus 10, or an average of 17.5 damage, is much better than dealing 1d6 plus 5 and 1d6, or an average of 12 damage if you were dual wielding 2 short swords, assuming you have a +5 dexterity bonus in both cases. That being said, there are 2 huge downsides that prevent Revenant Blade from being any higher in this list. The first downside is that you need to be an elf in order to take this feat. Unfortunately, not every player wants to be an elf, and there are other feats you can take which might benefit you more as an elf. However, if you are an elf, then this feat should definitely be worth considering as a rogue, since you'd be able to take more feats than other classes. The second downside of this feat, though, is what makes this feat too restrictive to ever take a high spot on this list, which is the fact that the double-bladed scimitar is a martial weapon that rogues can't learn by default. There are a couple of ways around this, however. The first requires you to multi-class into something that grants you martial weapon proficiency, such as a 1 level of Hexblade Warlock or a level of Fighter. The other option is more fitting for this class, which is to roll an elf that lets you gain access to the double-bladed scimitar as a weapon proficiency. Astral Elf, first introduced in the Astral Adventures Guide, has access to Astral Trance, allowing them to gain proficiency in any one skill or weapon of their tool of choice when finishing a long rest, and lasts until you finish your next long rest. However, Shadar Kai, Eladrin, and Sea Elves also are able to do something similar ever since they got reprinted in Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse sourcebook, where their trance ability got a touch-up, allowing them to gain 2 proficiencies that they don't already have, but can only choose from weapons or tools rather than skills like the Astral Elf. So even if you're only rolling an elf just to get Revenant Blade, you're not totally cut out for options. However, being only limited to 1 of 4 races to make use of both this feat and the weapon the feat upgrades might feel a bit too restrictive for some players. But if you can manage to make it work, this is an excellent rogue feat that helps them be more consistent with their sneak attacks, while also increasing the amount of regular damage they can deal if they can't proc sneak attack that turn, making Revenant Blade a worthy start to this list. And at number 9, we have Squire of Solamnia from Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen Adventure module. This feat grants you the ability to mount or dismount something at the cost of 5 movement, rather than half of your overall movement, which isn't terrible for a rogue, but not necessarily what makes this feat great for them. For that, we must take a look at Precision Strike, an ability this feat grants you that lets you roll a weapon attack once per turn, with advantage, and deal an extra 1d8 damage if that attack hits. You also have a number of uses for this ability per long rest equal to your proficiency bonus, but only expend them when you hit. So you can effectively spam this every turn as a rogue without worrying about losing your uses of Precision Strike if you miss. Being able to grant yourself advantage whenever you want every turn is incredibly useful, as having advantage means an increased chance to hit and land critical hits on something, which is especially useful since rogues benefit significantly more from critical hits than other martials due to their absurd number of math rocks you get to roll with them. Unfortunately, this feat is technically outclassed by an option feat that rogues can take from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything called Steady Aim, and also lets you have advantage on your next attack roll on that turn. However, steady aim does come with its own downsides for being used. Firstly, it costs a bonus action to use, which you might not always want to use due to having cutting action, hide, disengage, and dash. The other downside is that you can't have already moved on the turn you use this, and your speed immediately gets reduced to 0 afterwards until the end of your current turn. Ideally, you'd want to find a safe place to hunker down in and fire away with your bow or stab an enemy within reach using steady aim to give yourself advantage. But in times where you might want to move instead, Squire of Solamnia can be a great way to give you the ability to move while also allowing to give yourself advantage at a moment's notice with no downsides. And since the number of charges scales with your proficiency bonus, you'll only be using this feat more and more as the campaign progresses. In short, while rogues can come with the ability to grant themselves advantage, it comes with downsides that you might not want to deal with. So instead, Squire of Solamnia is an excellent feat to either substitute or supplement steady aim with, which gives you more control and flexibility over how and when you get advantage, which is why this feat takes number 9 on this list. And at number 8, we have Alert from the Player's Handbook. This feat grants you a bonus of +5 to your initiative, immunity to being surprised while conscious, and avoid creatures having advantage on attack rolls against you as a result of being unseen by you. Effectively, this means you can't be ambushed at all, nor would you suffer the effects of being caught off guard from creatures doing so. That means creatures that are invisible can't have advantage against you. Those hidden behind bushes or total cover can't catch you by surprise, etc, etc. You also just have a much higher chance of going first due to having such a higher bonus to initiative than everyone else. With your already high dex, Alert pretty much guarantees you'll always go first in a given combat, or at the very least lets you go second or third. This is especially useful if you're playing an Assassin Rogue, since one of the benefits of their 3rd level ability, Assassinate, lets you automatically have advantage on any creature that hasn't taken their turn in combat yet. Being immune to surprise mechanics and creatures having advantage against you as the result of being unseen is also a very good feature for a rogue to rock in case they somehow botched a stealth mission and have alerted the guards without actually knowing it. There is one slight downside to this feat, however, but it's one that really depends on your own perspective and what you wish to accomplish in combat. You see, going first is almost always a good thing. Paladins want to go first because they can smite down a creature for 1,000,000 damage in a single turn, allowing them to Nova a key target or boss to 0 hit points as soon as possible. A fighter might want to go first so they can effectively do the same thing, but with 3 or 4 attacks and action surge. A wizard might want to go first because it allows them to either deal a huge amount of starting damage with a fireball before they even have a chance to move or spread out, or throw down a slow or hypnotic static for some starting debuffs. Rogues can sometimes be a bit different. While they might want to start first sometimes, this creates the problem of making it harder for them to set up their sneak attacks. If you're the first one to go, chances are that your party members haven't had time to move within 5 feet of an enemy. On the other hand, you can always give yourself advantage via steady aim if you do manage to get the first turn and can't fulfill any of the other ways of gaining sneak attack. That being said, Swashbuckler Rogue can make better use of the Alert feat than any other subclass due to the Rakish Audacity class feature that they learn at 3rd level, which not only grants them a bonus to their initiative equal to their charisma modifier, but also grants an additional way to proc sneak attack if they are effectively 1v1ing a creature. You must have no creatures within 5 feet of you, and you must not have disadvantage on the attack roll against the creature, so long as you yourself are within 5 feet of it. The reason why going first as a swashbuckler might actually be more beneficial than not is because more creatures will spread out than they will be clustered together, meaning you don't have to worry as much about not dealing good damage on your first turn. That being said, there's nothing stopping you from using your first turn to cutting action, hide to try and gain advantage on your own if you don't have the option to use steady aim. So at the end of the day, it just comes down to a matter of preference as to how beneficial going first means to you as the player. All in all, this is an excellent feat to take regardless. And at number 7, we have the Skulker feat from the Player's Handbook. This is a feat that grants you the benefit of allowing you to try and hide while lightly obscured from a creature, rather than needing to be completely out of line of sight. You also don't reveal your location whenever you miss a ranged attack while also hiding. Lastly, you no longer gain disadvantage on perception checks based on sight while in dim light. Essentially, this is a stealth rogue's best friend, as it allows you to basically hide in more places while also keeping yourself hidden longer. With this feat, you can basically hide and take a shot at something while hidden without worrying about your missed shot revealing your location and needing to wait another turn to try and hide again. Even if you use your bonus action to cunning action hide, it can still be a bit of an inconvenience, since you still have to set up again. Remaining hidden in this way also grants you advantage on your attack roll, so no need to rely on something like steady aim either. There's also a bit of an unspoken benefit for the last part of this feat as well. Normally, whenever you have disadvantage on an ability check, this also applies to your passive checks as well, with the penalty for that being a -5 for disadvantage and +5 if you have advantage. So, while in dim light, you would naturally also have a -5 penalty to your passive perception checks while relying on sight. But with Skulker, that penalty no longer exists for you, which might be helpful in areas of complete darkness, assuming you have dark vision to allow yourself to see through darkness as though it were dim light. Essentially, this means that only magical darkness can affect your perception checks, which can be very useful at times. As for why this feat takes number 7 spot on this list, it's mainly because this feat really only caters to a specific playstyle. If you're rogue that really loves to sneak around the battlefield and take advantage of being hidden, then Skulker is an excellent feat to take. But if you're the kind of rogue that just likes to move around the battlefield a lot, then Skulker might not be as useful. Swashbucklers, for example, love taking on fights one-on-one and don't really make too much use out of hiding or being hidden. Meanwhile, an assassin rogue might take full advantage of Skulker to get those guaranteed critical hits in via their assassination feature, allowing them to automatically land critical hits against creatures that are surprised. That being said, however, Skulker is one of those feats that's definitely great on stealth builds in ways other feats aren't able to replicate, which is why Skulker is such a high contender for this list. And at number 6, we have Elven Accuracy from the Player's Handbook. This is a feat that allows you to reroll one of your d20 rolls whenever you make an attack roll using your Dexterity, Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma, whenever you would have advantage on that roll, effectively giving you double advantage. Along with that, you also get to increase one of your ability scores of your choice by the same stat mentioned, up to a maximum of 20. This feat is absurdly powerful for a rogue, since it allows you to reroll one of your d20s whenever you have advantage, giving you 3 chances to hit a creature when you say use steady aim feature to grant yourself advantage. Essentially, any form of advantage or way to reroll your attack is incredibly useful for a rogue, given that they can only make 1 attack per turn outside of dual wielding or taking advantage of the Revenant Blade feat. Speaking of Revenant Blade, Elven Accuracy does share the same restriction of needing to play an elf, but now also includes half-elves into the mix, meaning that there's a little bit more wiggle room for what race you can play in order to make use of this feat in comparison. However, this might be a good thing, as giving other races access to Elven Accuracy is like allowing Harpy's Featherstorm to be usable in any Yu-Gi-Oh deck. It would just be way too powerful without any sort of restrictions, and then everyone would use it. That being said, Elven Accuracy does take a lower spot on this list because of this restriction, since not everyone is going to want to play an elf or a half-elf just to get this feat. But it is powerful enough that it gets to, at the very least, sit at a higher spot on this list than Revenant Blade. And at number 5, we have a two-way tie between Skill Expert from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything and Skilled from the Player's Handbook. Skilled has the basic effect of allowing you to become proficient in a combination of 3 skills or tools of your choice. So, if you want to gain proficiency in Religion, Arcana, and Cook's Utensils, you can absolutely do that. However, with Rogue, you'd mostly want to opt for picking 3 skills. The reason for this is because both Skilled and Skill Expert synergize really well with the Rogue's 11th level class feature, Reliable Talent. Reliable Talent essentially breaks the skill economy to shambles by allowing your rogue to treat any number they roll on the d20 roll that is a 9 or lower as a 10 whenever they make an ability check with a skill that lets you add your proficiency bonus. So adding 3 more skills to be proficient, it means that you can no longer roll below 10 on those skills. Alternatively, you can also opt for taking Skill Expert, which can add a bit more flexibility at the cost of learning less skills. In addition to gaining proficiency in only 1 skill of your choice, you also get to increase one of your ability scores by 1 to a maximum of 20. And also gain expertise in 1 skill, including the one you just became proficient in, if the skill doesn't already have it. This means that, if you weren't already proficient in something like acrobatics, you could effectively never roll below a 23 at 12th level, as opposed to rolling a minimum of 6 without Skill Expert and Reliable Talent. So, were you to want to specialize instantly in a skill on the fly, or want to spread the love between other skills, you are never going to be doing wrong by taking either Skilled or Skill Expert, since skills are a huge part of playing a rogue. Being able to suddenly go from a -1 to Arcana checks to never rolling below a 17 on them with Skill Expert is a great way to fill a niche your party might be missing, while also giving your DM a heart attack as they suddenly would have no retort to you suddenly passing all their Arcana checks they call for, which is why these two feats rank so high on this list. And at number 4, we have the Sentinel feat from the Player's Handbook. This is an excellent feat for locking down creatures on the battlefield by granting you 3 benefits. The first benefit allows you to reduce the creature's movement speed to 0 for the rest of the turn if you hit that creature with an opportunity attack. Secondly, you can still opportunity attack creatures even if they use the disengage action before leaving your reach. Lastly, you gain a reaction to make a melee weapon attack against a creature within 5 feet of you if they choose to make an attack against a target that isn't yourself. All of these benefits are great for rogues because opportunity attacks and reactions that let you attack creatures when it's not your turn is one of the few ways to deal sneak attack damage multiple times per round, since sneak attack can only activate once per turn, but it doesn't come with the stipulation that other abilities can sometimes have where you can only proc the effect on your turn. Essentially, if you sneak attack someone on your turn, and then the creature you attacked tried to attack your barbarian, you can use the power of the Sentinel feat to make a reaction attack against that creature, thus proccing sneak attack a second time for massive damage. As for the first benefits, while preventing a creature from moving whenever you hit them with an opportunity attack is a powerful effect to inflict on something, swashbuckler rogues tend to make exceptional use of this feature, as their playstyle usually revolves around wanting to 1v1 creatures at melee range anyway. So now if a creature wants to get away from you, they simply can't since all their movement options are now locked, unless they have a way to move without provoking opportunity attacks that aren't tied to the disengage action. In short, Sentinel is a powerful feat for rogues, as it allows you to not only lock down an enemy's position, but it is also one of the few ways to allow you to proc sneak attack more than once per round in a more reliable way than just waiting for something to provoke an opportunity attack from you. However, the reason why Sentinel can't be any higher in this list is due to the fact that rogues already have a pretty solid reaction called Uncanny Dodge. Uncanny Dodge is a defensive feature that allows you to have the damage of an attack that hits you as a reaction. So you really have to be careful when using the reaction feature of Sentinel if you're anticipating a sudden shift in focus from the enemy onto yourself. That being said, Sentinel's power is strong enough that it still takes a high spot on this list, even if it doesn't make the big 3. And at number 3, we have Sharpshooter from the Player's Handbook. This is a feat that allows you to take a -5 to your attack rolls made with ranged weapons in order to increase the final damage you deal by a flat +10. You also gain the extra benefits of having your ranged weapon attacks ignore half cover and 3/4 cover, and no longer suffer from disadvantage whenever you attack using your weapon's long range, meaning you can shoot a longbow up to 600 feet at a creature that's protected by half cover with no downsides. This feat is amazing for rogues to take, because it allows you to attack from a much longer range more reliably, while also increasing their damage overall with their single attack. At lower levels, however, this feat is a bit weaker since a -5 to your attack roll is a hefty price to pay for what little accuracy you have. But once you start getting magic items and better ways to land hits more reliably, that -5 penalty starts to become less noticeable. Sharpshooter is also another way to make the most out of your 1 attack per turn by just adding more damage to it. You even have steady aim to give yourself advantage on your attack rolls if you ever want to help ensure that you hit with Sharpshooter. Simply put, if you want to maximize your range damage, this is one of the better feats to achieve this with. Unfortunately, it does require you to use ranged weapons in order to pull off, which is why it doesn't take a higher spot on this list. Regardless, when it comes to feats to take as a rogue, Sharpshooter is definitely one of the better options to take if you're going for a ranged build, since even a short bow has a long range of 320 feet, more than enough to cover most maps. And at number 2, we have the Mobile feat from the Player's Handbook. This is a feat that increases your base speed by 10 feet, allows you to ignore difficult terrain when taking the dash action, and lets you ignore taking opportunity attacks from a creature you make a melee attack against regardless of if you hit or not. All of these benefits are really good for a rogue to have, since an extra 10 feet of movement means that you effectively move up to 120 feet in a single turn if you use your action to dash and your bonus action to cunning action dash. However, even if you don't increase your speed to such an absurd level, being able to already use your dash as a bonus action gives both the first and second benefits of Mobile more versatility when using it. In fact, Mobile combos very well with a rogue's base kit, as it allows you to use your action to attack a creature, then bonus action dash to get away from them and out of their range without even needing to disengage first. Even swashbuckler rogues gain the third benefit of Mobile via their fancy footwork feature, which is always a good sign whenever a class outright gets part of, or even all of, a feat baked into their kit. All in all, there's no inherent downside to taking this feat, which is why it places so high in this list. Honestly, the only reason this feat doesn't take the number 1 spot on this list is because our next entry happens to be a bit more useful and can not only end combats much more quickly, but also provide you and your allies a little bit of extra support. However, 40 feet of movement with the ability to ignore difficult terrain as part of your bonus action dash while also promoting your hit and run style of gameplay makes mobile worth taking to begin with. And at number 1, we have Magic Initiate from the Player's Handbook. This feat allows you to choose 2 cantrips from either the Bard, Cleric, Druid, Sorcerer, Warlock, or Wizard spell lists, and you can only choose 1 spell list for both cantrips. You also learn 1 first level spell from the selected spell list that you can only cast once per long rest. Your spell casting ability is also determined by whatever spell list you choose from: Charisma for Bard, Sorcerer, Warlock, Wisdom for Cleric or Druid, or Intelligence for Wizards. While this feat has been power crept and outclassed by nearly every other feat that's come out that allows you to take extra spells, with the biggest difference being that you can use your own spell slots to cast these extra spells once you use the free casting for the day, Magic Initiate does still come with certain benefits. The first benefit is allowing yourself to learn 2 cantrips, rather than 1 that some of the other feats might give you. And the second is the ability to learn both the Booming Blade cantrip and find familiar spells at the same time, which is what we'll be covering in this part. Booming Blade is a cantrip that lets you deal extra damage with your melee weapon attacks, while also dealing more extra damage to the creature if they willingly move more than 5 feet until the start of your next turn. While you don't get the extra damage straight away, starting at 5th level, you do deal an extra 1d8 thunder damage outright whenever you hit with your weapon attack, and deal another 2d8 thunder damage if that creature moves. At 11th level, this damage goes up to 2d8 and 3d8 thunder damage, and at 17th level, it goes up to 3d8 and 4d8 damage respectively, letting you deal up to an extra 7d8 thunder damage total from a cantrip. Now, what makes Booming Blade so amazing for rogues is the fact that Booming Blade does stack with Sneak Attack. And since rogues only get 1 attack per turn, you'd be sacrificing absolutely nothing in order to cast Booming Blade. Basically, starting at 5th level, you could be casting Booming Blade at a creature and deal 1d6 piercing damage, if we assume you're using a short sword, plus your dexterity modifier, plus 1d8 thunder damage, all in the same attack. And if they qualify for Sneak Attack, then that's another 3d6 piercing damage. And of course, if that creature decides to move away from you, they take another 2d8 thunder damage. In short, Booming Blade is just a damage upgrade with no downsides and almost always worth taking whenever possible if you want to optimize the amount of damage you can do in a single swing. You do only get 1 attack after all. Meanwhile, Find Familiar is considered one of the stronger spells in D&D 5e because of one mechanic: the help action. Basically, along with all the other things that Familiar can do, such as cast your touch spells from its location and scout areas discreetly due to its size, Familiars are one of the best ways to give yourself or another creature advantage on their next attack roll because of the help action, which any creature can take, but most won't have the action economy to actually do so consistently. One of the most powerful things you can do is create an Owl Familiar, since its flyby trait allows it to fly away from creatures without provoking opportunity attacks, and have it use this help action on whomever might need it next before retreating to safety. This can combo exceptionally well with the Mastermind subclass, since their 3rd level feature, Master of Tactics, allows the rogue to use the help action as a bonus action, and increases the range of their help action to 30 feet if you're using it to help an ally attack a creature. This essentially allows you and your familiar to effectively become a help beacon that dispenses free advantage to all of your allies' attack rolls, while still leaving your own action open to cast Booming Blade on an enemy for massive damage, which is exactly why Magic Initiate is actually pretty good for rogues compared to other feats like it. While Arcane Tricksters already have access to the Booming Blade and Find Familiar combo, Magic Initiate allows any rogue to have this combo, thus increasing their power level to an astonishing degree. There's also the hidden benefit of making the high-risk, high-reward style of Sneak Attack much more rewarding, since the more damage you're able to do in a single attack, the more you can offset the damage loss from missing your 1 attack per turn. Unfortunately, Booming Blade does require a melee weapon to use, which is sort of the opposite problem of Sharpshooter. But for a melee-oriented rogue, Booming Blade is a must-have. And while there are other spells you can take, there aren't any better for a rogue to take, since you can't use any more spells than the 1 per day, or the 2 cantrips you learn. Despite that, however, Magic Initiate excels in allowing you to make the most out of your sneak attacks while also allowing you a bit of support in the form of Find Familiar, and is why it takes the number 1 spot on this list. Alright, and that's the list. Are there any other feats we may have missed for a rogue, or do you have any ideas for future videos just like this one? If so, we'd love to hear about them down in the comments. And take care.